Hi there. Okay, so you've reached the last one. This is poem number 5 of the key 5 poems we're looking at from the Power and Conflict section for AQA. This is My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, written in 1842, but set a long time before that. As usual, there are 3 key images here that hopefully by the end of the video you'll be able to remember 3 of the key lines from the poem and 3 of the key ideas that Browning is talking about with relation to power in this case. So what happens? Well, the Duke points out a portrait of his former wife. This is the Duke of Ferrara, and he points out a portrait of his last Duchess to a visitor. He describes his last Duchess and how well Fra Pandolf, who's a very famous painter, painted her. But also he starts to talk about how his last wife had lots of other male admirers. And as they walk away from the painting, it becomes clear that the Duke might have ordered that Duchess to be killed because he was jealous of her, and that he's now arranging his next marriage with the person that he's talking to and giving a tour of his house. So we're going to listen to this reading. This is a long and quite tricky poem, and hopefully this overview of what happens will help to understand some of the things that we hear in it.
My Last Duchess. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will't please you sit and look at her? I said Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked what air she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. So 'twas all one, my favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace. All and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-years-old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one and say, just this or that in you disgust me. Here you miss or there exceed the mark, and if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth and made excuse, e'en then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled no doubt whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. Will't please you rise? We'll meet the company below then. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed. Though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go together, dancer. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse. Thought a rarity, which Klaus of Innsbruck cast in bronze. For me.
Okay, a long and tricky poem, but some interesting ideas about powerful people and what they can do and get away with. Here are 5 key ideas that Browning was exploring or using, and 5 key bits of vocab it would be useful for you to use if you talked about in the exam. So the first is a dramatic monologue, and that means a poem with one person speaking, telling a dramatic story. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video here and write one sentence about how each of these ideas relates to the poem My Last Duchess. There is one that has been done for you if you have the booklet that accompanies this video. Okay, so now let's look at some key quotations here. Always worth looking at the first line and picking out key techniques and ideas and words. So the first line is, "That's my last Duchess painted," and it goes on. The preposition "that's" starts the poem off by talking directly to the reader. It's sort of pointing for you and going, look at that. So it controls exactly what the reader looks at. And the speaker of the poem is very controlling from the outset. He's a powerful man and he's used to getting what he wants. And from the first word, he's controlled what you look at. You're looking at the painting. The title, My Last Duchess, which is in the first line, is very possessive because of the pronoun my last Duchess. And this creates a tense and quite dramatic atmosphere from the outset. You think, well, if he's got possession of her, what else is he going to take possession of? Then none puts by, that means nobody draws. The curtain I have drawn for you, the curtain that the painting is behind, but I. So I'm the only person who can show you this painting. So this is a direct address to the reader. It uses the word you. And it makes the poem seem quite intimate, like he's having a chat directly to you. But the curtains could be a symbol of the Duke's power and control. He can draw the curtains for some people and open them for others, and it's him that's in control all the time. The curtains also have a connotation of death and funerals. So the idea of shutting the curtain on the Duchess could foreshadow, could hint at, that her possible murder later on. I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. So here we have sibilance, smiles stopped, and this creates a sinister, sort of murderous atmosphere. It says all smiles, not just the Duchess's smiles. So this could imply the Duke's has the power to stop any kind of joy, anybody smiling. If he says don't smile, you don't smile. It might even hint that she's not the only person he's done away with. Alternatively, it could be a suggestion that he ordered the Duchess to be killed because he was jealous of the smiles from her other admirers. It's not just her that smiled, they smiled at her too. And so then there's this really weird last line. We always look at the last line. It's always worth thinking why a poet chooses to end there. A seahorse, ... in square brackets means I've chopped some of this quote out. A seahorse cast in bronze for me. So a seahorse could be a symbol for something really rare and precious. You don't see a seahorse every day, just like you don't see a beautiful, young, powerful woman like the Duchess every day. But the verb cast, which means made out of metal, shows how he's also stopped the seahorse moving. He's controlled it completely, just like he might have controlled and killed the Duchess. And it ends the poem with the suggestion that he'll go on controlling and dominating beautiful things for his whole life. It's not like Ozymandias, where Ozymandias is powerful but then his statue crumbles and everyone forgets him. This Duke finishes the poem really powerful. So hopefully you can now see which of these ideas relate to these images. I'd make some revision cards or a mind map of these quotations. If you're gunning for a higher grade, you might want to look at this last image and the quote, "the faint half flush that dies along her throat." So for higher grades, again, what we might be doing here is trying to look at how an image can represent a number of sophisticated things, not just one. So the faint half flush along a woman's throat, so when she's blushing and hot and her throat goes kind of pinky, this is a very provocative image. It could be seen as sexual. The personification, a half flush, so blushing, that dies, hints at the possible murder, and faint and flush are both very physical descriptions of the young Duchess. These are very sensual and make you think of the intimate time that he might have had with her. It could even possibly be a description of her having just consummated her marriage to the Duke. Perhaps the Duke also, if he's thinking of this, her sort of being made to blush, he could be imagining her being unfaithful with other men, which could be the reason that he decided to possibly murder her. And additionally, the fact that he doesn't say the faint half flush that dies along her neck or her face, it's always her throat, is a possible hint at how she died by strangulation, overpowered by men. So hopefully that's a useful hint at the kind of analysis you can do to get those higher grades. I hope these videos have been helpful and good luck in your exams.